They arrived at the soldiers by the fence. It could now be seen that the fencing had been ripped out of the ground and hastily bent back into shape. "Stand aside," Caitlin called to the soldiers. "We're going through." The soldiers protested a bit, but not as much. The confidence of Caitlin's authority and the 13 people following her went a long way. Caitlin stopped Messenger before he ducked under the fence. "I'm going back to the air limb. I can help more from there. You have that terminal?" Messenger raised it up to reply silently. "Good," Caitlin continued. "There's a good chance you're going to see some bad stuff in there." "Dangerous bad?" Messenger asked. Caitlin looked towards the burnt husks of skyscrapers and stared for a moment. "Well, it's rough terrain. The wreckage might be dangerous, but by bad, there was a reason it got bombed." The 13 of them walked swiftly into the wreckage of Meston. They were giving chase, yet they knew that too much haste could mean a clue missed or a careless injury. The ground was black and worn with an old but deep burn. Footsteps could perhaps be seen here or there, but the disorder and filth of the terrain made it impossible to be sure. They spent 2 minutes scaling an incline before anyone realized it was a collapsed wall. It looked like it had once been part of one of the nearby fractured, towering structures. "War," Sasha whispered to herself. The fear of the wide open was magnified by the shock of this place. They'd said the war never happened, but then, what was this? Carefully passing through a hollowed window that was now diagonal, they passed through a massive piece of wall. They continued along the barely identifiable passage, with the wall itself looming overhead for a while before coming back out into relative open. Charred and warped metal objects littered the passage. Some looked large enough for a few people to fit in. A few of the big metal objects might have been able to contain a dozen or more people. They seemed to have doors to access them and broken windows. Inside, most had 4 or more objects that looked like they may have been chairs or seating, and one almost always had a wheel of some sort in front of it. Other debris was found smaller than the metal things. This other debris was more burnt than the metal and even less identifiable. Sudden realization made Messenger's eyes go wide, but he didn't speak of it. His terminal beeped in his hand, and a hiss could be heard in the sky. He answered the terminal and saw Caitlin's face. "Messenger, I'm above you," Caitlin said. "The air limb can see the heat of everyone down there. I'm feeding you a live map of it." With a few taps, Caitlin's face disappeared, and a blue graphic of lines and stripes dominated the screen. A few patches of red littered the graphic. Messenger immediately noticed how the graphic adjusted its angle so that it was always facing the same way relative to the ground. "These red blobs," Messenger began. "The ones in the middle are your group," Caitlin explained. "The group to the north and the group to the northeast are who you're out here looking for." Messenger held out his hand to divide the 10 providers with them into 2 groups. "You 5, come with me. You other 5 go with Tara and Sasha and head that way," he said, pointing north. Tara nodded and then checked that Sasha was doing okay. Sasha was hauntingly silent. She was avoiding eye contact, staring intently at a nearby rock. But she stayed by Tara, holding her hand. They took their 5 providers and headed north, while Messenger and his providers took the map in the less simple-looking northeast direction. The way north remained just as cluttered and burnt as things had been previously, and taller buildings loomed ahead. With a smaller group, they made less noise, and it was easier to listen for any citizens or subjects nearby. They had only been apart from Messenger's group for about 5 minutes when Tara felt Sasha's hand slip from hers. Tara stopped and looked at Sasha. Sasha was looking down another passage, frozen, staring. One of those non-metal lumps of debris was slouched against a wall, not entirely collapsed. The partly charred bone of an arm could be seen. It protruded from burnt lumps. Bones of a shattered hand lay nearby. a rib cage, vertebrae, a skull still clinging to some of its charred flesh. After noticing the nature of a few features, the rest seemed obvious. Sasha's eyes widened slowly. Her jaw loosened and her lips parted. The other lumps they'd been seeing, others in view right now. She knew what they were now, and she imagined how they died. The endless void of a world that took her from her home pressed on her harder than even before. The charred dead stared at her with emptied eye sockets, and a scream came from her. The world ripped it out of her, and the air from her lungs was not enough. It ripped her tears out. It pulled and ripped her courage and will from every fiber of her body and wrung her out like a rag. Everything she had within her pushed out through her throat into the sound that came from her. As she crumbled to her knees and inhaled, she didn't hear the words of concern from Tara or notice Tara's arms around her. And a scream came from her again, almost as forcefully. And a scream came from her again, weaker. Weakness broke her focus into incomprehensible speech, buried in uncontrollable sobs. The scream reached Messenger's group. The group stopped. The screaming didn't. Messenger looked at the map. All the little red marks had stopped moving, and then they began moving towards the scream. Messenger rallied his providers and broke into a run. The scream stopped, but it had been enough to get a reliable route. It wasn't that far. When they came to Sarah and Sasha's group, the providers were standing around. In the middle sat Tara, wrapped around Sasha. "Is she all right?" Messenger asked. Sasha was quiet, curled into a ball, staring into nowhere. Tara saw crying. No, she isn't. It's my fault. It's my fault. I should have never taken her out here. I should have never pushed her. We should be in engineering. I should never have taken her out here. Never." Messenger looked at the map. The other red marks were much closer now. People could be seen running towards them. All of the citizens and subjects in the ruins. They all came. "What's going on here?" Lena was the first citizen to get to them. "No one's hurt," Messenger said. It got to her. Why did you all come back?" "Mike's rule," Lena said, referring to her late partner. "When someone's in trouble, don't hide. Strength in numbers. Citizens strong together." Several of the other citizens repeated solemnly, "Citizens strong together." "Sasha's not a citizen," Messenger said. "Close enough," Lena said. "Ever since those outsiders came and started scooping us up, everyone from the facility, they're all my people." Tara kept holding Sasha and nodded. "All my people." "All my people," Messenger said. A hiss was heard approaching in the sky, from multiple directions. Messenger expected the military air limbs to drop soldiers like he'd seen back at the facility. He expected to be facing shots from stun weapons. Everyone instinctively formed a circle around Tara and Sasha, who were still on the ground. Everyone was prepared for defeat, each person deciding whether to surrender or go down swinging. No such choice was needed. Nearby, a new hissing was heard, higher pitch, softer than the air limbs overhead. In the darkness, a few people caught a glimpse of the purple gas. At least the crying would stop for a time. At least the darkness of sleep would do them that favor. For a time.